Hey everyone. So we're going to talk about Zenith a little bit. So Zenith is the code name of the next big release of Dagger with a lot of new exciting features. I think a bunch of you in this call are hardcore Dagger knots already, so you're already on Project Zenith on Discord and you're already testing it. But if in case you're not, FYI, there is this big feature that we've been working on with the community for a while, and we've been getting closer and closer and closer to releasing it. So we're getting real close now. So I would say officially today we're starting the last sprint towards the release. We've been sneaking in bits of Zenith in the stable release actually, and we've made it in such a way that you can completely ignore it and be blissfully unaware. But the Dagger CLI, if you're keeping up to date, 098, and I think coming up today or tomorrow 099. The Zenith bits are in there if you want to test them. And so if you've been on the fence thinking about it, maybe start now. Because we're going to need a final push on testing. It is a big change. And just to summarize the change, we're basically adding the big missing feature that everyone's been asking us for ever since last year. We introduced support for multi-language and multiple SDKs. Now you can use Dagger to turn your pipeline logic into code, which is great. You get a lot of the benefits of code. It runs locally, you can test it, you can split it up into packages, but you can only share those packages, right? You can only encapsulate your pipeline logic for reuse within your language that you chose, right? So we have silos within the Dagger ecosystem. There's Dagger Go code, Dagger Python code, Dagger TypeScript code, etc. But wouldn't it be awesome if you could encapsulate the perfect build in your language or the perfect deployment and integration or whatever this bit of DevOps knowledge is that you want to share with the world? Wouldn't it be cool if every Dagger user could use it across any language, right? And wouldn't it be cool also if that knowledge could be used even by DevOps enthusiasts that are more comfortable with the command line and shell scripts than code? Not everyone in the DevOps community has a good answer to choose your SDK. Some people want to get into coding, but they're not quite there yet. That's actually the majority of the DevOps community. So that Zenith does both of these things. We have this concept of Dagger functions. You write your code using SDKs just like before, but now instead of running that code in a custom tool that you run yourself on your local machine or in your CI, which you can still do, by the way, you'll still be able to do that. You write little functions. The Dagger engine loads the functions, runs them in containers, so they're nicely sandboxed, and then you can distribute a bunch of functions together in what we call a module. So Kyle's going to demonstrate everything I just explained while I catch my breath. And if you have questions, send them, at the same time or after. Look at Kyle and think to yourself, this could be me soon.
If only. All right, so we've got this repo that I'm going to use for this demonstration. It's the example voting app. If you've run into this before, it's used with Docker a lot. So I forked it from this Docker samples, and so the idea with this one is, it's kind of a not complex architecture, but it's not, a dead simple architecture. So it makes for a great demonstration of, this monorepo where we've got different services that are written in different languages and use different systems behind the scenes. And you might have different teams working in different languages day to day. And so kind of the core example here is using Docker Compose to pull all these things together. So we can also do all the same things with Dagger and more. So what we're going to do is, first say I want to contribute to this example voting app. So the first thing I might do is check out the repo, and I've got this code here, and maybe I make some changes to some Python code. And so now, before we even worry about writing some Dagger pipelines or doing whatever, let's say the first thing I want to do is just validate whatever Python changes I made are acceptable for the repo, right? So let's say that this super cool repo uses Rough for Python linting, and if you're not familiar with Rough, it's okay. It's just at the most basic level. For our case, it's a Python linter. Um, so I can go over to Daggerverse here, and Daggerverse is where all these reusable functions are living right now. So you can see all these things, but at the very top, we see the super cool one for Rough. And so I can say, all right, I want to use this to validate these Python changes that I just made to this code. But again, I'm not ready to write any Dagger pipelines yet. I just want to basically rough this thing, right? So what I can do is with the Dagger CLI, I can actually just call that module and call that function. So looking at this output here, and let me bump it up one more size here. We can see, I'm calling this module, and all this. I wish I was on like the next version that will be released, because there's a lot of things that are going to be just that much nicer coming up here. But so I can say, all right, this module exists that I just looked at in Daggerverse at this path, right? So I can say I want to use that module. I want to call this function called check. If you've used Rough before, that's basically what the subcommand for Rough is for the linting is Rough check. So that's what I want to run as an expert Rough user. And the directory that I want to run that on is results. And again, if we go back to that cool architecture diagram, result is the name of this service over here. Actually, I probably want to run that on Vote because that's the Python service. So let's do that instead. So I can run this on Vote. And who knows what's going to happen. As you can see from the history, I have not run that yet. So we're going to lint that vote thing, and maybe it's going to fail. Who knows? But so we've made some Python changes. We haven't written any pipelines yet. Cool. So our check passed, as we can see by our little check marks here. But we can see that without writing any pipeline code yet, I just used that module to do a thing. And so like jumping back to Daggerverse, like we've got tons of modules, and this number is like growing every day, but all these things that you can just execute without even implementing in code yet, and without worrying about like your local tooling or whatever else you have going on your system. You just run the functions. But now, let's take this one step further and say, okay, I've got this ecosystem in this project. We have different teams working on different parts of our application, and we want to actually have some Dagger modules for each of those components, and then pull those together so we can have like a proper CI pipeline. So if I look in this case, we have our little CI directory, which is where I decided to put those standards coming soon. So if we look in CI, so within this, we also have submodules for each of those components of our application. So again, like those would be like results, vote, worker, and there's one called seed as well that seeds the data for our application when we're just running it locally. So we've actually written submodules for these. And what we can actually, let me do one more level here. The other cool thing about these modules is that as we saw before, result was a node application, in this case, TypeScript. So the result CI is actually written in TypeScript. And so for our vote, that one was written in Python because that was like a Python application. So you can imagine like the teams maintaining their different parts of the stack and keep operating the language that they want to operate in. But then when we look at, where we pull this all together, and we look at our main part here. So the main pipeline here, like the entry point for all of our CI is written in Go. But we don't care what each of those functions or each of those modules are written in, because it's all interoperable between different languages, right? So we can, in this case, we've got two functions, one that just like builds each of those components or application, so we can make sure they all build, and then one that actually serves them as a service, similar to what the original Docker Compose implementation had. So if I look at Dagger CI functions, so we can see like what we just looked at here. And this is another reason I wanted to be on the next release today, is because this part, not only the syntax here, but we would have a slightly different TUI, so that's coming soon. But so we can see those two functions that I just mentioned, like we have build and serve. And if we do build, and we can, let's see, call build. So we want to call the function build, but we forgot what arguments it takes in, so we can ask for help. And when we get that help back, it'll say, okay, it takes in a directory. So let's say directory, and we'll just pass in the project. So this is passing in our project to do all the different builds on it. So it'll take a second. It'll go to each of those submodules. They're building those containers and do a build and hopefully tell us that it all worked. Cool. So the build passes, but again, we have this other function serve that runs it as a service, and that returns like a Dagger service. So if we call that one, we can see it looks a little bit different, where we're still calling this module, but instead of build, we're calling the serve function. We pass in our directory again. Again, that one returns a service. So on that service, we can call up to say, spin the service up, and we're going to tell it what port configuration to use, just like you might use on a Docker command. And so we run all this, and this is going to run this whole stack actually just within Dagger, where this is me in the green shirt, and then we've got these different services running in the background, and we have like multiple services using, the worker uses both the database and Redis, and then I guess this is essentially our data flow, so it's not really our DAG here, but if the arrows were a bit different, the worker is depending on Redis and database, the result is depending on database, vote is depending on Redis. Once that's running, we can see that we have a tunnel on those two ports that I passed in. And if we go here, so this is the results page, so it's pre-seeded, and you can vote for cats or dogs in this example voting app. And if we go over here, so this is the result service. If we go over here, hopefully we have the vote service, and so we can vote for cats or dogs. I'll vote for dogs because my dog is in the room and the cat is not. And then we go over here, and boom, it's updated real time, just like the Docker Compose would, but in this case, we just, oh man, we still got air horns. That's great. And so this is all Daggerized. I'll share the link for this. This is still like very much a work in progress. So we'll probably see some updates to this, especially with the next version 0.99 and so on that we have coming out. Yeah. Daggerverse. Anything else to add, Solomon?
Well, I love that you're using the demo app that from the DockerCon days. That brings up a lot of good memories. Um, no, I love the real world example. Maybe we can take questions. I mean, I'm sold on Zenith. I love it.
Well, I'm glad I could sell you on it. Perfect. That was all me.
But one thing I'll mention that came up in the chat is that Cal's showing there's two perspectives in Zenith. There's two people that will use it, right? Two people on the team. There's the Dagger power user who's all in, writing code, learning SDK, and taking DevOps knowledge and encapsulating it into code, like these modules here that Cal's showing. And then on the other side, there's everyone else on the team that just wants to build, just wants to test, just wants to deploy, but in a standardized way across every piece of the stack. And that's when the Dagger CLI comes in. And it's really important to us in this design that you can experience Kyle's work. You can show up in his repo and figure out how to build and deploy and test, etc., without having to actually write code for it or even read his code. I mean, you'll get to it maybe later as you get more interested, but that's something that Dagger doesn't have today. Before Zenith, right? You have to jump right in and write codes in order to get any value from from Dagger. So that's going to change. And so that's a pretty significant change in the user experience. And so that means some little things might break here and there, some little details. So also, if you have an existing project using Dagger, we're not going to break it overnight, but you may, you may need to, move it around a little bit to take advantage of Zenith. It's not going to magically become Zenith compatible. We got as close to magic as we could.
And Marcos asked, what will 099 bring to improve this? So I think I mentioned that a few times. So one major thing, like look and feel wise, is that there's a new TUI that's super slick and hopefully will give you more important information about what's running. One more subtle change that I think is going to be really great for the people that use these repos that aren't like the core maintainer of those Dagger pipelines is this how the Dagger modules are configured, especially in this context. And that the effective change is that I don't have to know that my Dagger modules are in CI anymore after this change. I can just clone the repo and run Dagger functions and see all the functions that are available for this particular project and just get onto running things without worrying about how they're implemented. So that'll be, maybe I can show that in the next call or in a future call once that's released.